All right, everybody. So let's get down to grass tacks here. We got some fights to talk about. Big money, big dollar, high paying fights to talk about here today.
And that's going to have to be UFC 270. We got to see Francis Ngannou. Don't they say he's the hardest puncher in combat sports ever? History. Versus our boy, Cyril Gane.
Mr. Gonzi, Mr. French.
All the way from Paris.
You know what I'm saying? Paris, Mr. Fencer.
Fact.
Technique. All about putting in the work. Not saying Francis ain't putting in the work.
No, not at all, because he did.
I'm just saying.
He did. He most definitely did. But we'll get to that. Our co-main event was a trilogy match between Brandon Moreno, the new chosen one, the golden boy of Mexico from Tijuana, versus Davison Figueiredo of Brazil. And that was quite the match. And, Davison ended up getting it done and getting that strap back, put it around his waist.
He got it back. He got that belt back, and now he's going to be wearing this gold jacket just like us here when he walks out to his next fight, you know what I'm saying? Which will probably be against Moreno, no cap.
Yeah, it's probably going to be the first ever 4-fight, what do you call that, set, I guess.
Wait, really?
Yeah, no one's ever fought.
Hey.
No one's ever fought 4 times.
Decided to learn a fun fact here. First 4-fight set in history. And we're going to see it again with Conor.
It makes sense, though.
Mark my words, Conor and Dustin.
That one makes sense less, but it makes sense.
It'll probably happen. Maybe later when they're older.
They're 1-1-1.
Yeah.
That's crazy, though. A draw, a dub, and an L for each of them. That's crazy.
So it needs to happen again.
100%. And then we also got to see Victor Henry make his UFC debut against Barcelos. And that was quite the match. He proved himself. We got to see, DC and Joe and Anik talk very highly of him as someone who was coming into the UFC. Chase and I were talking about it earlier. When you enter into the UFC, your skill level is already being so high, like your fight experience is being so high already, of already having fought 20 pro fights or 25 pro fights, making your debut, in the UFC.
Yeah, the UFC, I look at it as the UFC is the NBA of fighting, right? You have Bellator, you have I think it's called 1FC or something like that. And now you have the Eagle Fighting Championship, which I think before it was called Monster something, or he bought it from another company. But but now, there's so many fighting leagues that you can go into as an unannounced fighter or, somebody who hasn't fought before and work your record up. That's why you see guys who are unranked with 20-4, records. I mean, you see that with some champions, So it just depends on when you get into it. You could get into it at 19 and then work your way up from the UFC with a 4-0 record. Or you can, go do other things, work in other, factors, be a kickboxer, be a wrestler, work on your foundations, and then come to the UFC later in life and be able to,
make that run.
Right, and have a higher skill set to try to be a champion.
100%. But reining it back in, we'll take a look at the Moreno and Davison fight. So, to me, that fight was very interesting. When we looked at the scorecards, we saw that 2 out of the 3 judges had that fight as a draw, which I understand, but I do agree with their decision to give it to Davison.
I agree too. Moreno, I think, was a little bit overconfident. I think in the first and second fight, he kept his guard a little bit higher. He was a little bit more technical with his strikes, a little bit more patient. He took damage, but knew in the end that he would be able to be the successor. Also in the second fight, his wrestling was way more crisp. I don't think he worked on his wrestling as much this camp. I just think
them involving
Henry Cejudo into Figueiredo's training. I mean, it was really funny to watch how it went from Moreno having the better wrestling to Figueiredo having the better wrestling, all in just one fight. So that was really cool to see. I also thought Figueiredo is more of the power puncher, and for having him land the biggest shots of the fight doesn't help Moreno's case either. So I think that definitely could say Figueiredo pulled off the dub for sure.
Moreno, he had very good combinations, and I would say he had very good octagon presence. But as far as octagon control, it really felt like Davison was dictating the fight, especially after he landed that bomb, I want to say in the 3rd round, that dropped Moreno. His approach to the rest of the fight was much more finite. It was much more touch and go. He didn't want to risk jumping in there and letting his hands loose like he did in the previous 2 fights after he felt that power clean.
Yeah, I completely agree. He was just, and I also noticed that Moreno was throwing a lot of hook. It's like almost like hook straights. It's like you're throwing this hook shot, but you're throwing it for long. Instead of throwing the tighter 1-2s that Figueiredo was throwing up the middle and catching Moreno a lot. Moreno would throw a jab or a straight and get caught with a straight over, where when Moreno would throw his kind of like hooks, Figueiredo was able to block it or roll it or get out of it. And I think Moreno wasn't able to find those money shots because he wasn't just sticking to his original plan with those 1-2s, staying a little bit more boxing technical.
100%. So I'd be very interested to see these guys running back. I mean, I feel like I could watch these guys fight, a dozen times. I mean, as far as the division goes, we do have Pantoja, we do have Askarov, I believe, who are the other contenders at the top. But I think even with 3 fights done, they still have some unfinished business.
And it's crazy because we always say, fight 1 out of 10 times, who would win out of the 10 times. And I guess these guys are really going to fight 10 times. So we're really going to
get to see that.
Yeah. But I just think, whoever wins 2 in a row, they have the champ. Call it that. Whoever wins 2 in a row, then Moreno wins next time, they got to fight again. Whoever wins, hey, whoever catches that 2 dub, they got the dub. You know what I mean? Easy money.
So we can talk about Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou. So our main event of UFC 270. It was quite the battle, and it was very interesting, in my opinion. Coming into the fight, I had Cyril Gane with the edge and the advantage just due to his complete fighter package. I mean, he's a complete fighter. He's very technical with the stand-up and being on the ground with the grappling. And I thought his evasiveness and his footwork and his endurance was going to let him outpoint Francis in a 5-round fight as long as he evaded all the bombs.
Yeah, I thought, Cyril was going to win all the way up until like that day. And I was like, man, Francis could win. But again, Cyril is the more technical fighter. He is the more skilled fighter. He has the training. He's done the Muay Thai. His grappling, you could even say, is superior. But anything can happen when you get into these MMA fights. And so to say that Francis's power won't negate all of that would just be saying ridiculousness. So but we both betted on, we didn't bet actual money, but just, in general, we just thought that Cyril was going to win the fight for sure.
100%. And, it looked like it was going that way. When you watch the first round and the second round, and then even the third, moving into the fourth, Cyril controlled Francis on the feet the entire time.
I think he controlled him in the third round too. I know we had those wrestling slams and things like that, but I just want to make a point of like, if you're wrestling and you're doing these things, I still think you should have to be active on the ground. I want to see, the ground and pound. I want to see you working to get on mount. I want to see you working to get these crucifixes or doing these things on the ground. I want to see you work to punish your opponent, not only just sit on them to draw out time, to draw out control time. And I think that's something that has kind of been utilized a lot lately to kind of win over people that are better than you in all facets of fighting. It's kind of a weird
100%. I agree. And the way that wrestling and top control is weighed in the UFC, it's weighed so heavily. So when you have fighters like Francis Ngannou and Cyril Gane, for example, for a fact in Ngannou's camp that they were going to be, we could use worried as a word, or concerned of Cyril's stand-up. I mean, we just saw him go on his run, and they've spent the time sparring together. They know that he's very dangerous and elusive on the feet. So they're going to use the advantage that Ngannou has, which is his strength, size, and power. And the strength, size, and the power is going to let you, to an extent, power your way into those takedowns, power your way into that top mount with using minimal or the most basic of technique. Right. And he was able to do that and secure those 4 takedowns on Cyril and have over 8 minutes of control time. But when you look at the statistics, he has 0 submission attempts. He has less significant strikes than Cyril Gane as a whole throughout the whole entire fight. So it goes to show, a match like, Vettori and Holland or Brunson and Holland, when you have this extremely dynamic stand-up fighter go up against somebody who is very one-dimensional when it comes to it, as far as their package goes, and they just get taken down and they get stuffed. And Cyril, not only handled that, but he stood up almost immediately.
So, to get slammed, to get picked up and slammed on your back and then immediately work your way back up to getting out of that takedown in the matter of 1 minute is very impressive, especially when Francis Ngannou is the one slamming you. Mm-hmm. I also think that Cyril, knowing that Francis isn't that good at jiu-jitsu, he gave his back twice to be able to get up without Francis doing anything to give him a consequence on that either. I just think there was a lot of little things that Cyril did very well that Francis didn't, pick up on, that I think that the judges did miss. I think that Cyril did a very good job throughout the whole fight, and yes, he was on his back that 5th round, but still through another submission attempt, he's the one that initiated the ground, and he still outstruck him almost every single round. Mm-hmm. So for him to only have 5 more minutes of control time, but have 3 less submissions, and to have less total strikes, and to have less strikes landed, and to be outstruck on every single round, I just figure that Cyril would be able to get the dub on a mixed martial arts fight.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And the thing about it is it's an interesting dynamic right now with the heavyweight division, with Francis potentially pursuing a couple fights or a career in boxing. And if I believe this was his last fight under contract, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I know that there was some kind of rift developing between him and the UFC. Dana White didn't even come out and put his belt on him whenever he won the fight. He was there for Moreno, but he was not there for Ngannou.
He was watching on a plane somewhere on a phone.
Yeah.
He was like, hey, man, we don't got to get this man nothing. He's going to leave us to go fight Tyson Fury. Come on. But I just think what I predict in the future is that Francis will go leave to fight Tyson Fury, and Cyril will be awarded the champion, and then Francis will come back
and make a return.
And we'll
after
fight
Cyril's had a reign.
Right.
Because to me, there's no one else that's going to challenge Cyril on that level of technical stand-up. I mean, not in the heavyweight division. There's only 2. There's really one, and he's been teasing his return, and that's going to be John Jones. Now, if he does make a return, and he does want to have his return fight to be against Cyril Gane for the title, that would be a very interesting fight, and it'll be a video for another day.
For sure.
But at the current landscape of the heavyweight division, maybe Tom Aspinall, if he continues to go on his run. He's a pretty good dynamic striker. I just don't see guys like Volkov and Lewis and Rosenstruck and all these guys that Gane has left in his wake developing the skills they need to be able to handle that beast.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Anytime soon.
I completely agree. The heavyweight division is definitely interesting, but I think that Cyril will be the champion. I think even if they run it back, I think Cyril will get the dub. I think he'll understand that he cannot get taken down. And the fact that Francis Ngannou was getting into clusters with him and getting into bomb shows with him and wasn't able to land those clean shots and wasn't able to land those big bombs like he said he was going to do shows a lot, and shows a lot how he had to resort to the wrestling. And I think Cyril showed that he can hang with a guy like that, and the power is in everything. And I also think that being technical and working on the technique, knowing what your skill set is, and developing as an MMA fighter will get you the belt at some point.
100%. Yeah, it was a great night of fights.
For sure.
There were a multitude of other, dynamic things that happened. Like I said, we mentioned earlier in the video, we had Victor Henry. He looked really good. He's a very promising prospect. We had Michelle Pieta against Fajelo.
Another honorable mention, we have Nurmagomedov.
Oh my gosh, Saeed.
Quick fight.
47-second guillotine submission.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I just want to know, where are these guys training? I mean, if he's not related to Khabib, does he still train at that same center? I mean, he was super educated on the grappling. Is that something that is very, broadcasted in Dagestan? Is that something that now, since Khabib is, who he is? But also I think it takes, 10 to 15 years to get that good at grappling. And
yeah, so where it becomes like a second nature.
Right, and it just seems like these guys are coming in out of nowhere. So I'm very curious to see what's next for some of these guys from Dagestan.
And what looks really cool with these guys, Islam Makhachev, Saeed Nurmagomedov, not only is their wrestling phenomenal, correct, that fight against Thiago Santos is coming up here in the next 2 weeks, but their stand-up looks amazing. I mean, Saeed pressured his opponent to the point where he had to resort to wrestling, to which where obviously at that night he had the supreme advantage, and he was able to let him walk right into his guillotine for a very early first round submission. All right, guys, and that was our S-tier analysis of UFC 270. Stay tuned for our next fight analysis video here in the next coming week.
And go like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.